Welcome back to Grid Gym, guys. We have Brian St Pierre here. This is the biggest interview we have done yet. Brian's kind of what you might call like a superstar in the exercise, nutrition, fitness world. He started out, Brian, I've been following you since back when you were at Cressy Performance. Long-time reader of your blogs. Then he went and worked with John Berardi at Precision Nutrition, which is, I think, where you are now. Right. And really cool stuff. Really, I bought multiple of your products. Very practical, I would call it anyway, very practical information. Awesome at simplifying things down to a standpoint where it's just like, well, yeah, why couldn't anybody do this? This is how it is. Like, it's almost like an unapologetic way of being just like, well, this is how it works. So just go ahead and do it because it's really not all that difficult. But
I don't know if I use the word difficult, but not that complicated, right?
Yeah, exactly. It might be difficult, but it's not complicated, right? Yeah. We actually say that. We have like signs and stuff up that say that. But anyway, Brian, you want to tell them a little bit about you, your message, or give it a little bit of your backstory?
Sure. Yeah.
Before it.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the superstar connotation, but I'll take it.
Maybe I'm like a fanboy. Maybe that.
I appreciate it nonetheless. So we'll pretend for today that I'm some kind of superstar. I always kind of lead off with I work from home. I'll try not to have my Robert Kelly BBC moment, but my kids are playing outside and downstairs, so they could pop in at any time. So we'll just roll with it. It's pretty cool when you really think about it. So I get to do what I love and still be around my kids when I choose to during the workday, or when I don't choose to. So I always kind of lead off with that, just so everyone's aware. And then in terms of like my background, I actually went to college, University of Maine, as an engineering student. I was an engineering major for 3 years, but I spent more time reading about training and nutrition than doing my actual engineering work. Reading JB's website, before it was even Precision Nutrition, when it was ScienceLink and JohnBerardi.com, reading Alan Aragon on the bodybuilding.com forums. I mean, it dates me, right? You're talking 15 or so years ago. So, but it was cool.
I was like 2005 is when all this stuff, really started to become like the internet was like, oh my God, I don't have to wait 2 hours for a PDF to load.
Right.
Read 4 lines, go do something else, come back, read 4 lines, go do something else. Yeah.
Oh, that was going to college. That was probably the greatest thing. At university, you had like T1 internet connections. Everything was like instant. It was amazing. You'd rip so many songs off Netflix and not Netflix, Napster, right? Like
Napster.
Back when that was a thing.
Yeah.
So then I eventually switched to nutrition. Did that in 2 years. Got my CSCS. And was fortunate enough to end up interning for Eric Cressy. I mean, it was really right place, right time. It was before Eric even started Cressy. Well, now it's Cressy Sports Performance. He always gets on me about that. It's not Cressy Performance. But back then it was just Cressy Performance. But I just contacted him. It was really because I was playing or looking to play men's league rugby. I played rugby in college.
Oh, cool.
And a guy who wanted me to play on the team basically worked for Boyle. He worked for Mike Boyle. He's like, look, I can't just give you an internship with Boyle, but I highly suggest, reaching out to Eric Cressy if you know who he is. I'm like, yeah, I know who he is. He's from Maine, like me. I read his stuff on T Nation. And so I was like, okay. So I just shot him an email and he was still working at Excel. And basically just invited me to come down. Long story short, I ended up leaving there, starting Cressy Performance, and I came down and interned, or came down to observe the day that their racks came in from Elite FTS, their squat racks, with no instructions, right? So Pete Dupuis, who's like the business guy there, and I put them together based on a picture. Took us 3 tries to get it right. We'd go back to his computer, look at the picture, come back out into the lifting area. But it was fun. We had a good time. And then they basically just offered me an internship. There was no application process. It was just the way it worked out, right? And it was putting myself in the right position, but it was also just fortuitous timing. And so then I worked there for 3 years. So I was the first real intern, first employee. Then I left to do my master's in nutrition, become a registered dietitian, which I had always planned to do and start my own facility, much like Cressy Performance or Cressy Sports Performance in Maine. And invariably, as I was wrapping up my graduate work, PN put out an email saying they were looking to hire a whole bunch of people at the time. You know, they're looking to hire like 5 or 6 positions or something. One of them being a lean eating coach. And so I was like, you know, if I'm going to work for anybody else in this field, it would be JB, right? Whose work
right,
whose work inspired me and got me into this in many ways in the first place. So I applied, and I was fortunate. Out of like, there was like 300 people who applied for that position. They took 2 of us, myself and another guy. So yeah, that kind of led me to where I am today. I've been at PN for a little over 5 years. I'm the director of performance nutrition now at PN. I wear a lot of different hats. But yeah, so that's probably a long-winded version of the story, probably longer than you were looking for. But yeah, that's me. That's where I came from, man.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of gold just in that story. I mean, like, why not go for work for the best guy in the field, or the guy who's doing that's really the front runner? You know, like it's kind of that we talk about the proximity to power a lot. Like, you want to get around other people that are moving the direction that you want to go to, even if you're not necessarily on that route yet, because then you're more likely to get pulled up to them. You know?
Right. And the way I looked at it was, if I didn't get it, I would just do what I was going to do anyway. But I also looked at it as the way PN is structured, I can help significantly more people working for PN, you know, hopefully bringing a valuable perspective or insight than I could have just on my own. And so just because I can leverage all the other assets that they have, the administrative team, I wouldn't have to be a one-man show. And so I could spend a lot more of my time doing what I do best, coaching, educating, writing, right? And so it really allowed me to leverage my skills, and it therefore allowed me to hopefully bring a practical, as you put it, perspective to a lot more people. So it was a win-win opportunity, and it's really worked out well.
No, that's one of the things that I kind of wish. I don't regret doing it the way that I did it, but I went out and just started my own spot instead of going and working for Eric Cressy and looking back, like, it would have been tremendously valuable. You know, I had basically no relationships. I had no possessions. I had, you know what I mean? And like, I could have just left and gone anywhere, but I was like, oh, well, I don't have anything, so I can't move. It's like, well, that's the perfect time to do it, looking back. But
at the same time, there are pros and cons, right? So now you've learned a lot of hard lessons and probably developed a lot of skills that you might not have necessarily otherwise. So
yeah. So like, that's why I say, like, I don't regret it, but at the same time, like, there's value in going and doing that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
You wrote an article recently that, I mean, it was like I read it and I was like, this is going into our curriculum for like new hires, like, immediately. I mean, it was just like, this is the calorie in, calorie out, or calorie is just a calorie. I don't remember what the title was. But that's something that's really being thrown around out there in kind of the nutrition world right now. Like, some people are like, you could drink Coca-Cola all day long and still lose weight as long as it is underneath your macronutrients. And some people are like, well, you don't need to look at it at all. You could eat whatever you want as long as
it's keto, right?
Yeah, as long as it's paleo, as long as it's, you know, vegan, as long as it's, you know, whatever these, like, the new hot topic thing is. And but can you kind of like, I don't know, what even inspired you to, did you get, is that a question you get on a just everyday basis? Like,
I mean, I don't know about an everyday basis, but it's certainly something, like, I go out and present probably about once a month, travel and present to different fitness professionals, either privately or big public seminars and conferences. So I'm always interacting, and one of my main jobs at PN these days is I basically oversee our Facebook group for certification students and graduates. And so we've got, like, I don't know, closing in on like 12,000 people in there, and so we get a lot of questions, right? A lot of activity. And what's one of the things that comes up a lot, or comments or posts?
That's an insane number.
Yeah. So it's really cool.
Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, and there's a lot of activity. We do a lot of proactive stuff, but that's something that invariably comes up a lot. Is like, well, the calorie in, calorie out theory is outdated, and it's incorrect, and a part of me understands why they feel that way, right? Because your traditional calorie math doesn't work, because the body isn't like a linear machine. It's not a robot. It's dynamic. It's constantly changing. So if you assume that a 500 calorie per day deficit. It's going to lead to 3,500 calories per week deficit, which is about a pound, and therefore you will lose a pound a week indefinitely. That's just not how thermodynamics actually work and how the human body actually works, right? Because it downregulates. Intake and output are not mutually exclusive.
Not to cut you off, can you tell them about the 3,500 calories and where you're getting that number? And
so basically, a pound of fat is about 3,500 calories. It's worth about 3,500 calories, or it provides about 3,500 calories. So the conventional math is if I undereat by 500 calories a day relative to my needs, I might need 2,000 calories a day to maintain my weight. If I eat 1,500 calories a day, that's 500 less than I need, times 7 days in a week. That would be 3,500 calories. Ergo, I would lose 1 pound a week. So that's
I remember when I was first coming into the field, and I was working at this like big corporate monster type place. It was kind of like a Gold's Gym, and I was like, I hate this. It was day one. I was like, I want to stick a fork in my leg right now. And they were like, this is how you have to talk to people. And I remember looking at that sheet paper and be like, dude, that's bullshit. Like, I get it that you can all day long and sell people on it, but that's crap. Like, I'm not going to do that.
Right. I was a personal trainer in the distant past. I had to make cold calls and do that shit. Shit sucked. I've been there. I've done that. I know what that's like. I like to pretend it didn't happen, but it certainly did. I had to make.
I like to pretend too, but it definitely did. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. And so, but that concept, it's even still exists in research. Like, there's a great book called like Mindless Eating by Dr. Brian St Pierre.
Yeah, that's a great book.
Right, he's at the Cornell Food and Brand Lab, and they will do all kinds of work on what influences why people eat, how much they eat, and there's some really cool research, some really famous ones people are probably aware of. But even he in his book falls for that trap. He's like, if you eat 100 less calories per day, at the end of a year, you'll have lost, I don't remember what it was, like 10 pounds. Which is not actually true, because the human body will just decrease output a little bit. You'll still lose some weight, but it won't be 10 pounds. It might be 6 pounds. Because it's a dynamic process where the human body is always trying to maintain equilibrium, homeostasis.
I think everybody's reaching for control in this. They're like, no, it has to be exactly this. Or they're reaching for like any kind of semblance of like an explanation, because we all want, some clarity. But it's like, nah, it's like our body's going to decide. Like you might as well just let go of control and just eat a little,
And there's still a lot of things you can do, right? It doesn't mean that you're effed. There's still a lot of options, So I think that's an important piece to keep in mind. But in terms of going back to the original question, like, do I get that asked a lot, or what does it really come down to? I mean, calories do matter, right? Like, that is a fundamental law. People want to believe that calories don't matter. You can choose to believe it, but you're believing in something that is fundamentally untrue. But that doesn't mean you should meticulously count every calorie or do all kinds of fancy calorie math. They matter, but they're not the be-all, end-all in terms of health, in terms of performance. Right? Yes, you could theoretically drink tons of Coke, have some protein shakes, and take a multivitamin, and lose weight and maintain muscle because you're meeting your protein requirements, you're meeting your micronutrient requirements. Right? People have done things like this. There's a nutrition professor, and I think it was Oklahoma years ago, did a self-case study where he drank protein shakes, ate Twinkies, and took a multivitamin, and lost 20 pounds. His blood lipids improved. His blood sugar control improved because he lost body fat, and he maintained lean mass. But that wouldn't be a sustainable eating style long term, right? So just because it can be done doesn't mean it should be. Yeah.
There's a guy that did that with McDonald's after Super Size Me came out. Right. And he was, I forget what his numbers were, but he didn't eat anything. He basically changed Morgan Spurlock's rules. Like, he would always get the small fry. Mm-hmm. He was going to get a diet drink. And you know what I mean? Like, he made better choices, and he did that only 3 times a day, and he lost considerable weight. But
sure, because he controlled energy balance, right? But that's not how most people think about eating. That might be how fitness professionals think about eating, but most folks don't go through life like making a million calculations about protein needs and calorie and carbohydrate needs and counting the macros.
They're not psychos like us.
right? But even then, like there are generally simpler ways to do it. When you have more advanced individuals, you should do more advanced things.
Oh, yeah.
But when you have people who are relatively new to the game or just trying to make relatively, I would say moderately challenging goals or reach moderately challenging goals, you only need to do moderately challenging changes. So you should match the approach to the person and the goal rather than try to match every person to some specific dietary strategy, paleo or keto or macro counting or what have you. You should have more than one tool in your toolbox as a coach, essentially.
Yeah. Right. What we try to do is we try to give people a strategy that'll fit them, and we just focus on one strategy at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the ways that people really, you can tell me your take on this, but like one of the ways that we see people really screw up or really get themselves they like almost self-sabotage is they try to do all of this different stuff because they're so motivated, and then they burn out, like 2 weeks in, they're not doing any of them. Right. They tried to focus on 5 instead of just focus on 1, but if they devote themselves to that one thing, it's much more likely to happen.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, we see that in our own coaching practice. You see that in research that studies habit change. Obviously it falls on a bell curve. Some people can do more, but most people, like most things fall on a bell curve, or most people, that 70% of the population, it's going to do best with that one habit at a time kind of change, simply because it's sustainable, it's achievable, and then you're building fundamental skills that'll carry over time, right? You can use or strategies and tactics, whatever framing you want to use. It doesn't particularly matter, right? But what you're really doing is building skills and laying a foundation of consistent practices that build upon each other, and then they're maybe not quite 100% permanently there, but they're mostly permanently there. They're things that just become part of what you do. When you try to change everything all at once under these, perfect circumstances, you devote a whole week of your life to exercising and doing a juice cleanse and, carb backloading, but then you haven't built fundamental practices to just have that happen automatically, right? Where it just becomes routine. So you're doing all these things, and then shit hits the fan. Your dog gets sick. You get in a car accident. Life happens, right? Yeah. Something always comes up. An extra meeting comes up, throws your new routine out the window that doesn't have anything holding it in place.
Right. And
then things go really sideways.
Yeah, you just gave yourself another thing to be stressed over that led to more stress, and you're just practicing.
Then you feel guilty for not doing all 5 of those things, and then it just starts. But it happens. It's not to put people down. It's to realize that is a normal human response. When you try to change that many things at once and stuff goes sideways, then you feel guilty, and that is how the human psyche usually works. Right? That's not because you're weak or it's normal.
They didn't even necessarily they didn't do anything wrong. That's not like right or wrong isn't even in this scenario. It's did you make an error? Okay, what are we going to learn from this? Not, you better shame yourself and guilt yourself. And
I failed.
You feel real bad about this. Where's the lesson there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we at PN in particular, we're big fans of the one habit at a time. It can feel slow, but in reality, once those habits start building on top of each other, man, then momentum really starts to accelerate. And not only are you making progress as fast as the people who in the beginning changed things a lot at once, you've now been doing it over time when they may or may not have had that continuation. Yeah. So, it's not perfect. There's no one model that's perfect for everybody, right? It's just a model. So you shape your coaching practice to the particular client. But for the most part, for most people in our experience, that is generally the way to go.
How do you help people? Because it's hard when you don't see, for them that are going through this, they're trying to make these big changes. They're trying to take off whether it's 20 pounds or 100 pounds. And they don't see that upfront success, and it's all oh, it's coming. Oh, it's coming. How do you keep them? I don't want to use the word motivated, but how do you keep them focused?
Engaged. Yes. Yeah, it's tricky, right? Sometimes because, you look at, going back to research, it does show when people make some immediate progress, they're much more likely to stick with it and be consistent. And we know that consistency is the only thing that leads to long-term success. So when people aren't seeing the initial goals they're hoping for, like outcome goals, weight loss or what have you. Well, one of the things I always try to do is, well, let's look at some other markers of progress. Like, we do body measurements, or if you have like a bioelectrical impedance scale, that'll actually show you changes in body composition, even though those can be tricky. But even just how your clothes are fitting. There could be other... Go ahead.
Right, those are really interesting. Just like you can jump on one of those and then go have a meal and come back and you're a different,
Oh yeah, well it's because the way they work on water. But if you do them at consistent times, right. They may not be super accurate, but they can usually give you a good idea of trends over time.
Yeah, as long as they're precise.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, I totally cut you off there.
So basically, I mean, one of the things that we looked at, are there other markers that are moving? Maybe the scale's now, but the scale's not always reflective of what's going on. You can be losing body fat, but for some reason retaining water. If you're a female going through your menstrual cycle, that affects water retention, right? A great story I always tell, I always go on tangents and tell stories, but a great story I always tell is a good friend of mine, a high school hockey teammate of mine, actually introduced my wife and I. He played in the NHL. He got like a cup of coffee in the NHL, played like 10 games.
Oh, cool.
And he was always a bigger guy. What's that?
I said that's pretty cool. I mean,
yeah, no, he was a significantly better hockey player than I was. But he played in like 10 games, and he was always on the cusp of like getting called up or getting sent down, or he'd get called up and then not dress. Regardless, he was a bigger guy, right? He was like 6'1", 6'2", 220, and they wanted him. He was with the Rangers. They wanted him to stay below 220. So he was working with a guy on his nutrition. He was eating lower carb to help him keep his weight down. But the guy would tell him, once in a while you want to go out, get sushi with the guys, or do whatever. No big deal. So long story short, he goes out and gets sushi. Then the Rangers call him in the next day to weigh in, right? And he was like 232. From all the carbs and all the sodium. He doesn't normally eat carbs, so he's restocked a ton of glycogen, was retaining a bunch of water from all the sodium, and he got called into the GM's office. He got his ass reamed out, basically 2 days later, 218. So it didn't change his bodily tissue, right? It just changed his scale weight. And that just shows the power of water retention. And so oftentimes one of the things we look at are other markers changing, right? Waist circumference, is that changing? Because sometimes those can be indicative of things that are happening that the scale is not showing. Now, if that's not changing, it's like, okay, well, let's take a step back and reevaluate some stuff. You tell me you've been doing X, Y, and Z, whatever the habits or strategies were that we chose, and doing them consistently. Show me what that looks like. What does it look like to you? And sometimes there was a miscommunication somewhere along the line. You thought they were doing 1 palm of protein at each meal, and to them 1 palm was like 3 palms, right? So there can be little things like that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're saying a lot of this stuff, because like I think, especially the people at Grit, like they hear it from me over and over, and I think they almost get to a point where they're like, "There he goes again. He's just saying all this crazy shit," But no, I think even if you're, for certain people, even just looking at actionable steps that they've taken. So like, even if they're there for 6 weeks and they've seen no change in scale, no change in body, no measurement scale, or no measurements have changed. However, they hadn't gotten off the couch in the previous 6 years, and now they've showed up to work out 5 days per week for the last 6 weeks. To me, I'm calling that a success. Like, you cannot, like when they're sitting there shaming themselves, I'm like, you can't sit there and say that you haven't made progress, because you showed up 5 days a week for the last 6 weeks.
Right.
And
I know it has quite led to the results you're looking for. I'm like, but that is coming, because you are here, you're resilient, you're showing up every day. Clearly there might be some things you need to adjust, but you are doing so many of the right things that I think a few small tweaks possibly might just get us there. And sometimes, once in a while you get those clients where it's like, man, shit's just not adding up, right? Like they're coming in, you really do think like they're showing you what they're doing and it looks right. Like I had a client online. She was a cardiologist actually, and she was, I think, around 52, 53. I'm going off the top of my head here. And she had been eating low carb and low fat for a while. before coming to see me, right? Which is like a contest prep type of intake. And so she comes to see me, and so we upped her intake a little bit to see if it would boost like her performance in the gym and then just help with her being more active throughout the day. She was feeling great. Performance, or wasn't feeling great. She was feeling better. Performance was better. Weight and body composition went nowhere for like 3 months. I mean, just stayed exactly the same. She was sending me food logs. She was eating really well, much more balanced. I had her training too. Her training was good. I'm like, this just isn't adding up. Like something should be changing at some point here. So she went in for some blood work. No sex hormone, like no thyroid function. It was just non-existent. So then she
stressed out her body.
It was partly probably through menopause, through whatever other things have been going on to shut down her thyroid. Once she got that treated, 10 pounds within the next 2 months.
Really?
Well, you figure that's one of the ways people will say that calories in, calories out doesn't matter. But it does, because hormone levels impact calories out. Right. So improving her sex hormone profile, like getting higher testosterone, returning her estrogen levels a little bit, improving her thyroid function, increased metabolic rate, helped keep muscle tissue, helped burn fat tissue. So it actually, all those things do impact calories out. Hormones are not separate from calorie expenditure. Right? Hormones affect calorie expenditure. That's how the system works. So I think people oftentimes conflate those kind of two things, or they believe that they're independent, or it's just eat less, move more is not the same thing as calories in, calories out. Eat less, move more is just part of that.
Thanks for saying that.
So I think that's one of the areas I see where people are like, oh, that doesn't work. And it's like, well, you're right. Oftentimes it doesn't because of the way it's applied, but there are many other things involved. Right? Just going to the gym for 30 minutes and then sitting down the rest of the day isn't what I would necessarily call moving more, right? Moving more is also like not just physical activity, but NEAT, right? Your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically a fancy word for fidgeting, pacing, maintaining posture, but it actually can add up to hundreds of extra calories a day. Right. That can be the difference between losing weight or not losing weight.
Yeah, that's like if you look around at like big rooms, like anybody watching this, try this next time. The people who are moving the most, that are just kind of like that are shifting their weight and kind of moving their head around the most. Notice they will be the thinner, more trim. Like they'll be thinner people. Like just in general, I don't know if that's a call to like start fidgeting and develop some.
I'm definitely like the leg shaker. My wife's always like touching my legs. I don't even know I'm doing it. But no, the story I always tell there is my best man at my wedding, my best friend growing up. He was my college roommate. To this day, he is just incredibly lean. Always has been, because he just has boundless energy. He's constantly moving. He eats like a horse, but he's constantly moving, pacing, fidgeting. He's not one to sit still. He doesn't sit still. And I remember coming home for, I don't know, it was like a late night lab or something. It's probably like 8:00 at night. I opened the door. We shared like a 5-person on-campus apartment. And I opened the door to our room that we shared, and he's in his underwear, like holding a milk crate full of books, just doing lunges. Granted, you could call that exercise, but it's just, he just had to move. He just had like energy to expend, and he was one of those guys that was pacing, watching a movie, and he's constantly moving body parts. But it helped him. That was the big reason why he stayed so lean.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. Like I just like there's times where I'll just be like, Raish, I gotta leave. I gotta go burn off. Like I gotta just, it's like steam off the top or something. Just I gotta go. Right. So I can totally understand your friend. No, I'm glad you're saying. There's so much stuff in here that I'm super glad that you're saying this. Is there any other, like, I always say that I'm enemies at 1 o'clock, but I never actually get it. But was there anything else that you, like, any big messages, anything, or like for one, like your big message that you want to get across to people, or like the inspiration you had for why you do this, and number two, like where people can follow you or get a hold of you or employ your services?
In terms of getting a hold of me, following the work I do, I mean, I would just check out precisionnutrition.com. We got a free blog that I write for. I don't do a lot of work on my personal blog these days because I devote 95% of my time to PN. So definitely just check out the work we do there. You can come across so many free resources, infographics, articles, and video courses, and what have you.
It's awesome. Precision, it's a wonder people even hire you guys because you put out so much free stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, I think there's for the do-it-yourself crowd, there's a lot of stuff there. But oftentimes, one of the things we know is that accountability is super helpful. Even coaches like to have coaches because there's no such thing as like the lone ranger doing it alone. Like that's like a false, Hollywood image. Everybody has help, and there's nothing wrong with getting help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of this person either knows things that I don't know or can help me see my own blind spots. Like I'm my own worst coach, right? Because I just program for myself the things I like to do. Right. So invariably I don't do Turkish get-ups, right? I only do ab wheel rollouts or whatever. So the parting thought I think would say, focus on the big rocks. Too often I see people focusing on, you would call it the hot topic of the day, or just a lot of minutia that in the end isn't going to be the thing that moves the needle long term. Might move it short term, and sometimes it does move it long term. But generally speaking, the big rocks would be things like don't smoke, drink in moderation, get sleep, eat adequate protein, eat lots of fruits and vegetables. They're not sexy, right? Yeah. But you look at research, 3% of Americans do those things, right? And exercise 150 minutes a week.
And
that's
all
astounding.
of them know to do
right? These aren't they're not groundbreaking things. They're not like these unknown elements. And doing those things is shown over and over and over again to get people closer to where they want to be. And then you can play around with particulars, dropping gluten and seeing how you feel, decreasing sugar, right? Going lower carb or higher carb and playing with those kind of things to see what you respond best to. There's nothing wrong with doing those things. But I would suggest only doing those things after your fundamentals are in place. Because the people who, they might be a keto expert or, all these other things, but the people who get the best results or who are where you want to be are usually there because they have the strongest fundamentals. They may actually say it's because they do intermittent fasting or they do keto, but it's usually because they do a lot of the fundamental things. They sleep, they minimize alcohol, they manage their stress, they get plenty of protein, and they don't overeat calories. Yeah. Regardless of the dietary persuasion they follow to get them there, vegan or keto or paleo, they're all doing a lot of the same things, right? The underlying mechanisms that lead to success in a lot of those diets are those big rocks. And then the minutia, it can certainly help. I'm not suggesting that it can or that it's not important, but it's not the most important thing. And so play with those things after. That would probably be my biggest takeaway.
No, I love that. I couldn't agree more. Like that's spot on. From like my experience and my I think to deny that would almost be like silly, I don't know a better word for it.
But it's, there are salesmen, for lack of a better word, who will pitch people about like, no, it's got to be about, because they sell like compelling stories, right? Eating fruits and vegetables is not a compelling story. It's just not, right? Making sure you eat your protein is not a compelling story. But drinking bulletproof coffee because it's going to give you super energy and hold you. And some people it works for them, and that's great. But you can get a much better sales pitch out of it than eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, even though that one is probably much more important for you long term.
Right.
So it's harder to sell the sexiness of the fundamentals, but having a strong foundation allows you to play with everything else and then see how that affects you. When you don't have that strong foundation, those other things just become that's when people yo-yo, right? From one thing to another to whatever hot topic. And so that strong foundation, it allows you to see through the bullshit, right? When you have that strong foundation, you get a sense of like, you can spot your BS radar so much stronger when you have that strong foundation in place, because you feel so much more confident in what you're able to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you start understanding some of this stuff, like you actually get to like have an opinion on it. You get to be like, okay, well, that makes sense, or that doesn't make sense, and this is why.
Exactly.
But anyway, what are you? So follow you on Precision Nutrition. Do you have any other social media stuff?
I know. So it's interesting, right? one of my big goals is managing this Facebook group, but I'm not on Facebook, right? I literally.
Really?
Well, I mean, I'm on Facebook, but do you ever see me on Facebook? Not much, right? I had like the same Facebook profile picture for like 6 years until my wife was like, "Dude, come on, you got to change." Because it's just I was on Facebook when it was the Facebook, and it was just college. Right. So I was there, and I got sucked into it. And after like 2 years, I was like, "Man, this is just like a life suck for me." And so I would just go down the rabbit hole of like 3 hours of looking at people's pictures, and then it's become much harder to pull away. Now they've gotten better and better at keeping you engaged. And so I purposely like extricated myself from social media. That was just a personal preference. Then I was kind of asked to do this Facebook role, but I pretty much just live in that group. Because I just view it as another way to interact with fitness professionals as opposed to like being on social media. So no, not particularly. I mean, I have Twitter. I don't really tweet. I mean,
I'm with you,
once in a blue moon.
I basically got rid of all of mine, and then like once we started the gym, I was kind of like, well, like it's undeniable that you have to do this.
Oh, there's no question. If I worked for myself, I would have to do it, right? Because it's how you speak to your audience. Fortunately, we have other people at PN who manage that component. But no, I'm not easy to find on social media. I would say your best bet would be precisionnutrition.com. And then I do, podcasts, and I speak to journalists. I write blog posts, and I present at seminars. So if you kind of keep up with that stuff, keep up with PN stuff, and you'll hear about where I'm doing what or what I've contributed to.
Everybody that's watching this should be on the PN or precisionnutrition.com anyway. It's just a fantastic website. But and I have yet to buy anything from there that I don't think is just outrageously amazing. Like everything that I've ever bought from there, I got back at least tenfold. So
that's awesome.
It's definitely worth it. Yeah, I'm a big fan. But anyway, I'm only like 11 minutes over. I hope that didn't dig into your day too much.
No, it's all good. I'm gonna go eat lunch, but we're good to go.
Perfect. But thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it, and I think our people will too. But anyway,
I appreciate it, Adam. It was a good time.
Yeah, thanks. We'll end broadcast, guys. Thanks for being here. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
And I think we're still on.